They had fame, money, and faces. The world adored, yet behind the cameras. Their stories spiraled into handcuffs, courtrooms, and cold concrete cells. How do Hollywood's brightest women fall from luxury mansions to steel bars? Was it arrogance, addiction, or a system that loves to build idols just to watch them burn? From household names to forgotten faces, these actresses once ruled red carpets, but ended up trading designer gowns for orange jumpsuits. Some fought the law and lost. Others thought their fame could protect them until reality struck harder than any script ever could. What really happens when fame turns fatal to itself? This is the side of Hollywood no one wants to see. The fall of the untouchable. 15. Lindsay Lohan. There was a time when Lindsay Lohan ruled Hollywood. From her breakout in The Parent Trap to her reign in Mean Girls, she was the definition of talent meets beauty, a child star who seemed destined to become a Hollywood legend. But the fairy tale didn't last. Fame came too early. The spotlight burned too bright, and soon Lindsay's name was no longer on movie posters, it was on mugshots. Her downfall began with a string of DUI arrests, reckless driving, and probation violations that turned her life into a media circus. What once looked like the fun of a party girl became the tragic portrait of a starlet, unable to escape her demons. Hollywood watched as she moved in and out of rehab, courtrooms, and even the Los Angeles County Jail. For someone who once earned millions per film, her biggest struggle became simply staying free. But Lindsay's story wasn't just about rebellion, it was about Hollywood's obsession with watching young women fall apart. Every mistake she made became a headline, every relapse a spectacle. By the time she served her brief jail sentences, the industry that once adored her had already replaced her with newer faces. Years later, Lohan has tried to rebuild her image reality shows, small roles, even business ventures in Europe, but the shadow of her criminal record never completely disappeared. She remains a haunting symbol of what happens when Hollywood fame meets youth, chaos, and no one to say enough. Her time behind bars was short, but her punishment, public humiliation, and lost legacy lasted far longer. Lindsay didn't just go to jail, she became a warning that in Hollywood, even the golden girl can crash hard enough to hit the cold floor of a cell. 14. Lori Loughlin. For years, Lori Loughlin was America's sweetheart, the elegant, smiling face from Full House, a symbol of wholesome perfection. To millions, she embodied everything clean, family-friendly, and good. But behind the polished image, a quiet secret was brewing, one that would explode into one of the most shocking scandals in modern Hollywood history. In the infamous college admissions scandal, Loughlin and her husband were accused of paying huge sums to secure their daughter's spots at an elite university. It wasn't a violent crime, but it struck a nerve, the image of privilege using power to cheat the system. When the FBI arrests hit the news, America gasped Aunt Becky was now a federal defendant. For someone who built her entire brand on grace and decency, the sight of Loughlin walking into court in a crisp white suit was surreal. Her fall from grace wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, humbling, and deeply public. She eventually served a short prison sentence, but the damage was permanent. Hollywood distanced itself. Endorsements vanished. Her wholesome reputation, the very foundation of her fame, cracked beyond repair. Inside prison, she reportedly kept to herself, reading, praying, and reflecting on how far her choices had taken her from the world she once represented. Her release brought tears and headlines, but not redemption. The audience that had once cheered for her now saw her as part of a larger sickness, the entitlement of wealth and fame. Lori Loughlin's story isn't about violence or addiction, it's about illusion. The illusion that fame can buy anything, even integrity. And when that illusion broke, it revealed something darker: how fast Hollywood can turn its angels into cautionary tales. 13. Felicity Huffman. Felicity Huffman was never the scandal type. Known for her powerful performance in Desperate Housewives and her Oscar-nominated turn in Transamerica, she carried the air of a serious actress, respected, grounded, and far from tabloid drama. That's why when her name appeared in the same college admissions scandal as Lori Loughlin, the world was stunned. It wasn't just another celebrity misstep, it was a quiet betrayal of everything she stood for. Huffman admitted to paying to alter her daughter's SAT results, a decision she later called the biggest mistake of my life. Her honesty in court earned her a shorter sentence, but the humiliation was total. Cameras followed her into prison, a once graceful woman in beige sweats, stripped of Hollywood glamour. She served only a few weeks behind bars, yet those days marked a lifelong scar, a reminder that even good intentions can destroy a legacy when privilege interferes with fairness. Unlike many stars who fight back or deny everything, Felicity owned up to her crime. She cried, apologized publicly, and accepted her punishment with quiet dignity. But the industry was less forgiving. Roles disappeared, projects went silent, and her name became synonymous with deceit. It was a brutal lesson. In Hollywood, sincerity doesn't always lead to redemption. Still, Huffman's story carries a faint trace of hope. She slowly returned to acting, taking small roles that reflect her older, wiser self. The spotlight no longer flatters her, it exposes her humanity. And maybe that's the truth of her fall. Felicity Huffman didn't go to prison because she was evil. She went because she was human, flawed, desperate, and blinded by a mother's love. In the end, her time in that prison cell became more than punishment. It was her mirror one that showed her what Hollywood had made her forget: humility. 12. Winona Ryder. In the 90s, Winona Ryder was untouchable, the gothic queen of cool, the fragile beauty in Edward Scissorhands, and the voice of every outsider who dreamed of being seen. She was smart, mysterious, and magnetic. But one winter afternoon in Beverly Hills, that image shattered. Surveillance cameras caught her walking out of Saks Fifth Avenue with thousands of dollars worth of unpaid designer clothes. Within hours, the story exploded: Winona Ryder, arrested for shoplifting. It wasn't the crime itself that stunned Hollywood, it was the absurdity of it. A millionaire actress stealing handbags and dresses? For many, it seemed like self-sabotage. For others, it was a cry for help. In court, Ryder looked pale and broken, a far cry from the poetic heroine she once played. The tabloids called her Winona Swipe, and directors quietly crossed her off their call sheets. She was convicted, sentenced to probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. Behind the headlines, the truth was messier. Ryder later spoke about being emotionally drained, medicated, and lost after years in the Hollywood machine. She wasn't driven by greed, she was drowning in exhaustion. Her fall revealed something most stars never admit: fame doesn't protect you from loneliness, anxiety, or the quiet need to feel alive again. Over time, Winona rebuilt. Her return in Stranger Things was more than a comeback, it was a resurrection. She didn't erase her past, she embraced it. But that mugshot from 2 decades ago still follows her, a haunting reminder that even the most beloved star can crumble under invisible weight. Winona Ryder never saw a prison cell, but her sentence was different: years of exile from the world that once worshipped her. And when she finally came back, she did it not as a flawless icon, but as proof that broken doesn't mean defeated. 11. Michelle Rodriguez. Michelle Rodriguez has always carried that raw, fearless energy, the kind of power that made her perfect for the Fast and Furious franchise and every role that demanded fire. She wasn't the delicate Hollywood type, she was the rebel, the fighter, the woman who made toughness look effortless. But off-screen, that same wild streak blurred into chaos, and Michelle's life began to mirror the reckless characters she played. Her troubles with the law started with multiple DUI arrests and violations that revealed a deeper struggle, the kind of self-destruction that fame often hides behind red carpets. In the mid-2000s, she was sentenced to jail for driving under the influence and violating probation. Her stay was brief, but symbolic. Hollywood's tough girl had found herself on the wrong side of the system she thought she could outrun. Unlike many stars who hide behind PR teams, Michelle faced her mistakes head-on. She admitted she had anger issues, a short fuse, and an appetite for danger. Those traits made her magnetic on screen and destructive in real life. Her time behind bars forced her to confront that edge. She later said it was a wake-up call, one that made her realize how fragile freedom really is. After her release, she returned stronger. Hollywood welcomed her back, but her reputation changed. She was no longer just an actress, she was a survivor. The time in jail didn't end her career, it refined her. It stripped away the illusions of fame and left only grit. Today, Rodriguez still walks that thin line between boldness and self-control. But there's wisdom in her eyes. Now, the look of someone who's been caged and refuses to ever go back. Her prison sentence might have been short, but its lessons became lifelong. She didn't lose her spark, she learned how to control the fire. 10. Paris Hilton. Before reality TV and influencer culture took over, Paris Hilton was fame itself. A walking headline, a flashbulb fantasy, the original celebrity for being famous. With her diamond-studded phone and her catchphrase, "That's hot," she built an empire on glamour and excess. But beneath the gloss and couture, Paris lived a double life, one of late-night chaos, reckless driving, and defiance. In the mid-2000s, her party lifestyle caught up with her. After repeated driving violations and ignoring probation terms, a judge sentenced her to jail. The image of Paris Hilton, heiress, socialite, and pop culture princess, being led away in handcuffs, became one of the most surreal moments in modern celebrity history. The world that once worshipped her now watched her cry inside a cell, stripped of makeup, freedom, and control. Her time behind bars lasted just a few weeks, but it was a cultural earthquake. Paparazzi swarmed, tabloids exploded, and critics called it justice for privilege. For Paris, it was a public unmasking. She later admitted that jail changed her, that isolation forced her to see how fragile her persona was. The experience broke through the character she had played for years, the shallow blonde heiress, and revealed a frightened young woman who had lost herself inside her own performance. After her release, Paris reinvented herself. She turned her story into a lesson, speaking about trauma, reform schools, and the mental toll of fame. She became an advocate for accountability and healing, something no one expected from the woman who once symbolized excess. Paris Hilton didn't just go to jail, she went through a rebirth. Her mugshot became a symbol not of disgrace, but of awakening. Behind the diamonds and cameras, she learned what fame had stolen from her: peace. 9. Heather Locklear. For decades, Heather Locklear was the definition of television perfection, the golden-haired beauty who ruled prime time with shows like Melrose Place and Dynasty. She had it all: talent, charm, and the kind of effortless appeal that made her one of the most recognizable faces of the 90s. But behind that glamorous smile, Heather was quietly spiraling into a storm of addiction, anger, and self-destruction that fame couldn't conceal forever. Her troubles began with multiple arrests related to domestic disputes, driving under the influence, and battery on police officers who responded to her home. Each headline chipped away at the Hollywood image she had built so carefully. The public saw only the mugshots, eyes swollen, makeup smeared, and assumed she had become another fallen star. But the truth was darker and sadder. Heather was battling deep emotional pain and dependence on prescription medication. In and out of rehab, she tried to fight her demons, but they kept finding her. When she was finally sentenced to time in jail, it wasn't the fall of a diva, it was the collapse of a woman who'd been performing happiness for decades. Her brief incarceration was followed by more treatment, more attempts at recovery, and a slow fade from the spotlight that once defined her. Hollywood turned away, yet fans never stopped hoping for her comeback. Locklear's beauty had once made her a fantasy. Her vulnerability later made her human. She eventually found small moments of peace, away from fame, away from chaos, but the world would never forget how her perfect image shattered. Heather's story is a haunting reminder that the brightest smiles can hide the deepest pain, and that sometimes The cell door doesn't just close on a crime, it closes on years of silent suffering. 8. Amanda Bynes. Amanda Bynes was once Hollywood's most promising young comedian, a Nickelodeon prodigy whose timing and charm made her the next big thing. From The Amanda Show to She's the Man, she seemed unstoppable, a rare blend of innocence and wit that made her beloved by audiences and critics alike. But behind the laughter, a storm was quietly forming. The pressures of fame, mental illness, and substance abuse collided, and the result was one of the most tragic Hollywood meltdowns of her generation. By her early 20s, Amanda's life had become a public unraveling. Her bizarre tweets, erratic behavior, and legal troubles turned her from a rising star into a tabloid obsession. She was arrested for driving under the influence, reckless endangerment, and even throwing a bong out of her apartment window, incidents that became viral headlines overnight. The once bright girl who made millions laugh was now being mocked and pitied in the same breath. In one of her lowest moments, Amanda was placed under psychiatric hold, and her parents took control of her life through a conservatorship. Short stints in jail and rehab followed, each time accompanied by the same question from fans. What happened to Amanda Bynes? The answer wasn't fame or failure, it was fragility. Hollywood chews up its child stars, then acts shocked when they fall apart. Years later, Amanda tried to rebuild her identity away from acting. She studied fashion, focused on recovery, and began speaking about her struggles with honesty. But the scars of her breakdown, the mugshots, the headlines, the ridicule still linger like ghosts. Amanda Bynes' story is heartbreaking because it's not just about a crime, it's about a system that rewards youth until it destroys it. And though her time behind bars was brief, the real prison was fame itself, the kind that never truly lets you go. 7. Farrah Fawcett. Farrah Fawcett was more than a television icon, she was the face of an era. With that famous red swimsuit poster and her dazzling smile, she embodied American glamour like few others ever could. But behind the perfect image, Farrah carried a restless spirit, a defiant streak that refused to conform to Hollywood's rules. That same fire that made her a star also led her into some of the darkest chapters of her life, including a brief but shocking brush with the law. In the early years after Charlie's Angels made her a global sensation, Farrah's personal life began to unravel. Her relationship with Ryan O'Neal was turbulent, filled with public fights and emotional chaos. Then came the moment that shattered her angelic reputation, an arrest for assault following a violent altercation. Though the incident was small in legal scale, it became huge in cultural weight. The idea that America's sweetheart could be handcuffed stunned the public. While Farrah didn't spend long in jail, her mugshot became a media fixation. It wasn't the crime that defined her, it was the way the world reacted to seeing perfection fractured. Overnight, the flawless Farrah became a human being again, flawed, emotional, vulnerable. And that's what made her story unforgettable. The press called her unstable, but the truth was more complex. Farrah was fighting for control over her image, her career, her identity. Hollywood had turned her into a symbol, not a person. And when she finally pushed back, it pushed her into infamy. In her later years, she faced cancer with extraordinary courage, turning her pain into activism. But even at the end, the world couldn't forget that glimpse of rebellion the night the golden girl of the 70s found herself on the wrong side of a jail cell. It wasn't the end of her story, but it was the moment the myth of perfection finally broke. 6. Reese Witherspoon. Reese Witherspoon was supposed to be the perfect Hollywood success story, a Southern girl who rose to fame through talent, discipline, and charm. From Legally Blonde to her Oscar-winning performance in Walk the Line, she built an image of elegance and intelligence. She was the woman America trusted, polite, hard-working, and clean-cut. That's why her arrest shocked everyone. It happened quietly, late one night in Atlanta, when her husband was pulled over for driving under the influence. Reese, sitting in the passenger seat, made the mistake of confronting the officers. According to reports, she was emotional, argumentative, and defiant. "Do you know my name?" She allegedly asked a line that instantly went viral and haunted her image for years. Moments later, the actress who once played America's most charming lawyer found herself handcuffed and charged with disorderly conduct. Her time in custody was brief, but the damage was deep. The world saw not the polished actress, but the power of ego, how quickly fame can twist confidence into entitlement. Reese later apologized publicly, calling her behavior embarrassing and out of character. She admitted she had let the stress of fame get the best of her and promised to learn from it. Hollywood gave her a second chance, because it always loves a comeback, but Reese never forgot that night. It humbled her, changed the way she handled her public life, and made her far more protective of her image. What made her story resonate wasn't the crime, it was the humanity. The idea that even someone as composed as Reese Witherspoon could lose control in a single moment of pride. Her arrest was a warning wrapped in irony. The woman who built a career on wit and poise learned that grace isn't about never falling, it's about standing back up when the cameras catch you at your worst. 5. Shelley Duvall. Shelley Duvall was one of the most distinctive actresses of her generation, fragile, haunting, and unforgettable. She brought a strange kind of beauty to every role, from The Shining to Popeye, embodying characters that lived on the edge of fear and innocence. But behind the camera, Shelley herself began to drift toward that same edge. The pressures of Hollywood, years of emotional isolation, and a series of personal breakdowns slowly pulled her away from reality until she became a recluse, far removed from the fame that once surrounded her. Her descent wasn't marked by scandalous headlines or wild parties. It was quieter, sadder. In the 2000s, police in Texas reportedly detained her after multiple public disturbances, bizarre, disoriented behavior that alarmed neighbors and fans alike. Shelley wasn't violent or criminal in a traditional sense. She was a woman slipping through the cracks of a system that had long forgotten her. Yet, the moment she was placed in custody, tabloids rushed to sensationalize it, the shining star gone mad. She didn't spend long in jail, but that image, a once celebrated actress in a fragile mental state, haunted Hollywood. It forced people to confront how cruel the industry can be to its own. Shelley Duvall had been Stanley Kubrick's muse, Robert Altman's discovery, and a symbol of delicate brilliance, but when she needed compassion, she got mockery instead. Years later, when she reappeared in interviews, her words were fragmented, her memories foggy, yet her gentleness remained. She spoke of her loneliness, her pain, and her wish to feel safe again. Her arrest wasn't about crime, it was about collapse, the collapse of a mind pushed too far by fame. Shelley's time in custody stands as one of Hollywood's quietest tragedies. It wasn't the bars of a jail that confined her, but the invisible walls built by an industry that takes what it wants and forgets who it breaks. 4. Taryn Manning. Taryn Manning always carried that raw electric energy, a performer who could shift from charm to chaos in a heartbeat. Audiences knew her from 8 Mile, Hustle, and Flow, and the hit series Orange is the New Black, where she ironically played a troubled inmate. But as her fame grew, life began to imitate art in ways she never saw coming. The actress who portrayed addiction, instability, and rebellion on screen would soon find those same shadows waiting for her off it. Taryn's struggles were never hidden. She was candid about her battles with mental health and alcohol, yet the headlines became harder to ignore: assault charges, public altercations, restraining orders, and multiple arrests for erratic behavior. One night, she was accused of attacking a makeup artist. Another, she was caught driving under the influence. Her life became a carousel of court dates, mugshots, and breakdowns, each one feeding the Hollywood machine that profits from its fallen stars. When she eventually spent time behind bars, it felt almost symbolic, the woman who played a prisoner, now living the role for real. For Taryn, jail wasn't just punishment, it was a mirror. In interviews later, she admitted feeling lost and angry, confessing that fame had isolated her more than it ever liberated her. "People love you when you're broken," she said once, "but they don't know how to help you heal." After her release, She tried to rebuild through music and small acting roles, yet controversy kept circling her name. Hollywood had moved on, but she never fully escaped its grip. Her story is one of blurred lines between fiction and reality, success and self-destruction. Taryn Manning's time in prison wasn't the end of her story, but it was the clearest moment of truth. Behind the chaos was a woman screaming to be seen, not as a character, not as a scandal, but as a soul struggling to survive the fame that ate her alive. 3. Natasha Lyonne. Before Netflix made her a cult icon in Orange is the New Black and Russian Doll, Natasha Lyonne was one of the brightest and most troubled young stars of late 90s Hollywood. Her breakout roles in American Pie and Slums of Beverly Hills promised a long, glittering career. But behind the razor-sharp wit and wild charisma was a woman unraveling. Addiction, illness, and reckless living consumed her 20s, and soon the rising star everyone loved became a cautionary headline. By the early 2000s, Natasha's life had collapsed into chaos. She was evicted, hospitalized, and eventually arrested after a series of disturbing incidents that involved drugs and property damage. What followed was a descent into courtrooms and police reports, the darker side of the fame machine that had once adored her. When she was sentenced to time in jail, the irony wasn't lost on anyone. A woman famous for her rebellious on-screen spirit was now trapped behind real bars. Her time in custody was short, but her reckoning lasted years. Natasha later described it as hitting rock bottom the moment she realized that no amount of talent could protect her from herself. She battled hepatitis, near homelessness, and total isolation before slowly beginning the long climb back to sanity. Hollywood had written her off, but she refused to stay gone. When she finally re-emerged, Natasha didn't try to hide her scars, she turned them into art. Her raw humor and hard-earned wisdom became the foundation of her comeback, and audiences responded to the honesty. Orange is the New Black wasn't just a role, it was therapy through performance. She turned her past sentence into a symbol of survival. Natasha Lyonne's story proves that redemption isn't about forgetting the jail cell, it's about owning it. The woman who once hit rock bottom built her second act on truth, resilience, and the refusal to die the way Hollywood expected her to. 2. Shailene Woodley. Shailene Woodley was never the typical Hollywood star. While others chased fame and luxury, she spent her free time hiking barefoot, advocating for the planet, and rejecting the materialism that defined her peers. She was the face of conscious living, thoughtful, grounded, and real. That's why when news broke that she'd been arrested, the world was stunned. What crime could the star of Divergent and The Fault in Our Stars possibly commit? The answer: standing up for what she believed in. In 2016, Shailene was arrested during a peaceful protest against the Dakota Access Pipeline. She had joined indigenous activists to speak out against environmental destruction and water contamination, but when police moved in, cameras captured her being handcuffed and led away. It wasn't the image of a rebel, it was the image of courage. Yet, the system didn't care. She was charged with criminal trespassing, booked, and briefly jailed for daring to defend the planet. Unlike most celebrity arrests, this one didn't come from excess or ego. It came from conviction. Shailene used her platform to bring attention to the protest and the mistreatment of Native communities. The mugshot that tabloids tried to turn into shame became a badge of honor. "I was just one of hundreds who stood up," she said later, refusing to let the experience silence her. Her time behind bars was short, but it changed her perspective forever. She spoke about how it stripped away comfort and forced her to see injustice up close. Hollywood called it a controversy. Shailene called it truth. In a town obsessed with image, she risked hers for something real. That's what makes her story powerful, not that she went to jail, but that she went there for others. While most stars protect their fame at any cost, Shailene Woodley proved that integrity sometimes comes with handcuffs. 1. Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart wasn't just a celebrity, she was an empire. The queen of perfection, she built a multi-million-dollar brand from scratch, teaching America how to live beautifully. Her name meant success taste, and control. Every dinner she hosted, every magazine cover she graced, reinforced one image: Martha always wins. And then, in a stunning twist that no Hollywood scriptwriter could have imagined, America's ultimate symbol of order and elegance was led into prison for a white-collar crime. In the early 2000s, she was convicted of obstruction of justice and lying to investigators during an insider trading probe. It wasn't the crime itself that shocked the world, it was who had done it. Martha Stewart, the woman who taught millions how to decorate cupcakes and fold napkins, was suddenly wearing a prison uniform. The tabloids went wild, calling it the fall of the domestic goddess. Cameras waited outside the correctional facility as if it were the Oscars. Inside, Martha remained composed. Reports say she taught cooking classes to inmates and carried herself with quiet dignity. But the truth is, her sentence, though only 5 months, rewrote her entire legacy. When she walked out, the world no longer saw just a lifestyle icon. They saw a survivor. She lost millions, yet gained something more powerful: authenticity. Instead of hiding, she embraced her past. She joked about prison on talk shows, rebuilt her brand, and returned stronger than ever, co-hosting with Snoop Dogg, launching new products, and reminding everyone that scandal can't erase skill. Martha Stewart's story is the perfect Hollywood paradox: a woman who went from queen of class to inmate, and somehow turned her downfall into a masterclass in reinvention. Her prison sentence didn't destroy her, it crowned her the ultimate comeback queen of American fame. Fame can build empires and destroy them just as fast. These women once ruled the screens, adored by millions. But behind the fame came choices, chaos, and consequence. Some fell to addiction, others to arrogance, and a few to courage itself. Their time behind bars stripped away the glamour, leaving only truth. In the end, it wasn't about guilt or innocence, it was about humanity. Hollywood may forget its fallen stars, but the world never forgets the fall. Because in this town, the spotlight burns brightest just before it goes dark.